Okay, so this is the second section in this sprawling responsive web design presentation, and the focus is on the process. So if you've been working for any kind of client or in-house doing websites professionally, whether you're paid or not, you might have already used some of these tools. If you haven't, you're definitely going to. It's definitely going to maybe hit a little spark because you're gonna recognize the need for these tools. These are things that I basically kind of just developed as I did freelance and developed my design process over the years. So this is a kind of a basic graphic describing the entire scope of a project I would do with a client. And when I say a client, I mean I'm not just talking about like a cool startup. In fact, I think like startups aren't that cool actually. I'm describing the entire process of building a website, right? And this could be for yourself. This could be for your parents or a relative who has a business. This could be a freelance. This could be, you could be working for a major medical corporation in-house, and all of these things still apply because you're always going to have this kind of process. Things will change, but this is modeled after what's called like a design thinking process. And so if you've ever seen that reference in other classes or in your work, and usually you start by understanding the what you're trying to do, defining the scope of what you're going to do, and then there are iterative processes in this. And you start by trying to translate what you've learned and defined into ideas. What's the information hierarchy going to look like? What are the wireframes for this website going to look like? And then you go through a design process where you iterate, you make a new design, you come back to it, you revisit and kind of look at it and get feedback on it. And then once you've got a design, several iterations later, you can build prototypes and test it. Now, if you're just going to code a design, you usually don't prototype it, right? You'll code one of the pages in a website, and then you go and test it, and make sure it all works. So in some way, that's a prototype. But if you're doing any kind of input from a user or a web application, then you're definitely going to have prototypes. A prototype is kind of a functional proof of concept that your idea works. Whether you've got like a email sign up form or you're rebuilding LinkedIn or something, right? And so building and testing, adding content, all these things are iterative processes until you get to the launch. And so this presentation is ordered in the same way. So first you got to understand what's the story you're telling, what's the mission of the organization, what are the functions of your products, who are you building this for, who are you trying to reach, right? And so when I say who, I think it's a really good idea to imagine this person. Who are these people? How old are they? What are their capabilities on the computer? Because you have to build a website that is not only usable, but that is accessible to them, right? And so you can create what's called a user story. User story kind of looks like this. As a blank, I want to blank so that blank, right? As a faculty member at a college, I want to go to this website and find out how I can get an evaluation copy of this book so that I can have my students purchase it, right? So in some ways, what you did with identifying a goal for the usability study or test is the same thing. So this is a slide we created when we were doing the Davidson Land Conservancy website, and these are all stock photos, but and stock names or made up names, but they are actual user stories that we created by interviewing them, trying to understand their mission, developing user personas, and understanding their goals. And everything we did after, we never touched design or code until we had this ironed out and had an agreement. So then, while you're doing that, there are lots of problems that you're going to come up against, right? And so a competition scan is a really good way to understand how other people have solved all these problems, right? So there are a lot of bike manufacturers, and they all make mountain bikes. And there are multiple kinds of mountain bikes. There are XC mountain bikes, there are enduro mountain bikes, there are downhill mountain bikes, there are trail bikes, now there are e-bikes, and all those different types of bikes are for different types of terrain, and they all have the same design problem, which is how are we going to communicate our selection of bikes to all these users? And these websites these screenshots are, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. But you can see that they all have different ways to do it. Some have these colorful drop downs, and others have lots of pictures, and others, and this one has on the right has a filter. If you go look at these sites now, I'm sure they've been updated and they look much better, but they all, the idea is that they're all looking at it differently. A competition scan also helps a client who doesn't know how to be a client. If anybody here works for the Gig Hub, or works for somebody who knows they're hiring a student, or knows they're hiring somebody who's doing this, for the first or second or third time, right? Then they more than likely are not paying high dollar. Should they be paying you? Absolutely. If you're not getting paid, then that's a big problem. If you don't have a lot of experience and you're not getting paid a lot, okay. Every time you do a website, raise your rate by 20 bucks, right? But my point here is that they don't know how to be clients, so you have to teach them. You have to ask them to do a competition scan and give you a bunch of websites that are the competitors that they have. What do you like? They don't know how to talk about design. They don't know how to talk about symmetry, minimalism, design style, design thinking. They don't know anything. All they know is make a cool website for me. You laugh, but that's what they sound like. Just make it cooler than last time. So this is the ideation design section. So before I allow myself to touch Photoshop, Figma, whatever design tool, because I love the design part. But I don't, until I do this, I don't all this stuff, but especially this, the information architecture. Identify the organization of the content and talk with the client about what that looks like. And so I've got 2 different versions here. On the left, you've got like a visual version. On the right is what I usually do, which is I kind of like just type up using the hierarchy in a bulleted list. And that helps you to understand where this content's going to go, what are the main links and texts in the navigation. If you let a client pick the main navigation, they'll have 20 buttons in the main navigation, and most of them will have like 50 words. It's insane. How many numbers in the phone, in your average phone number without the area code? 7, right? And that's a specific number because we're not capable of remembering much more than that. And so that's my kind of golden rule. No more than 7 in a main navigation. Because by the time you get to number 6 or 7, you've already forgot what the other options are. So, and then comes the wireframing. And this is what you all are going to do today if you haven't started yet, right? Create a wireframe, which is a simple mock-up, and you can do it on paper, whiteboard, you can do it in Figma, you can do it right on the grid. You don't even need a grid when you're kind of starting. You're just identifying what goes in this thing. What's on the home page, what's on an example page. Usually I do a home page and a text page, and if they've got some other kind of special app or something, then I do that one too, because that's going to it's going to require a different kind of layout. So it's a visual guide, and it's like the skeleton, right? So it's easy to edit, it's easy to move things around. You haven't done any design work yet, so you can get feedback on it, you can think about it a little bit, you can show it to your client, right? So it's very light. It's just to establish where that stuff goes. And we're gonna skip this slide because I've decided I'm gonna start to, instead of deleting my Photoshop instructions, now that Adobe has purchased Photoshop or Figma, sad face here. I think that I'm gonna have to, I don't know, like learn how to teach web design with only a pencil and paper. So yeah, so you can wireframe in Figma. You can do it right on the Twitter Bootstrap system, and but after the wireframe, everything should be done in the grid system. Everything, because everything's going to snap, because everything's going to go in this grid system, and because everything is going to like you're never not going to build a website with columns. You're always going to have content that sits on the same baseline. So then comes the actual design process where you start to lay stuff in here. And I have this thing where PSD stands for Photoshop document. And so I have this kind of rule where I always have to do 6 iterations, and they always have to be different so that I can test out different things. And because the first one always stinks. The first one is just me trying to figure out what was in my head when I started to work with this person. So this is for the College of Fine Arts at Florida State, and all of their departments. So it had to be flexible enough to include department pages for theater and art and design and art history and all the other stuff. And so the first one stinks. It's just me, like experimenting with the images that they've given me and trying to identify what I can kind of shove into this system, right? And you should name these things accordingly. I like to now in Figma, I'll kind of stick them all into the same giant template so I can compare them really easy next to each other. And you can see I'm kind of like experimenting with the columns at the bottom, and I try a different column system because I feel the one on the left is too busy. They're really hard to see with this projector, but you're testing out different fonts. If you look at the presentation and zoom in, you can see these a lot better. And you can see, like the difference between the calendar here and the calendar here, trying extra text here versus not, getting feedback throughout all of this process, right? So once you kind of establish a style, right, a system like here, so I'm going to use this button. That's going to be the button or the call to action, right, the CTA, because this doesn't do it. This doesn't say, click me, go do this thing, but this obviously is a button, right? So once I kind of establish this system or a design system, then I can try to adapt other pages to it and try other content in there. Well, here I say 5, but so 5, 6, something like that. Do a lot of iterations because actually that's how you get better, right? It's this kind of process, and they have to be different. You have to make them different enough so that you're testing new things, you're trying to solve the design problems that you have. I'm going to skip this because I want us to get to work. I'm going to talk about this instead. So this is a slide about problem solving and what's called design patterns, right? So there used to be this website. You could still find, somebody else purchased this, and you can still find this website. But you can also go to these other websites here. These are collections of recurring solutions that designers use to solve common problems, right? So Pattern Tap was a great name, and it's a huge collection. And they've been replaced by these other ones. And yeah, so here's an example. Forms, or data content and management patterns, or layout and navigation patterns, or user screen and patterns. So a pattern is something in programming. A programming pattern is like the singleton, right? Or some kind of way that you, some kind of organizational system that you build relationships in order to solve common problems. And a design pattern is like a kind of visual, interactive version of that, right? So if you click on any of these, you'll find a whole bunch of examples. They'll talk about the problem and the various solutions that different apps will use to do this. So that's one side. The other side, UI patterns. And none of these are as good as Pattern Tap. I really am sad that Pattern Tap went away. But this one also. So like I want to do a fat footer. What is a fat footer? Well, Here are some examples. These are all examples of fat footers. And I think I just don't like these other versions. I don't like the design interaction of these other versions, because Pattern Tap used to have them all in kind of this nice grid, and you could like see them. You're like, I know what I want. I want a fat footer. I don't know what it's called. It's the footer with all the stuff in it, right? So yeah, so you can click through these and find examples of fat footers. And usually there's a screenshot and a link to where you can find the actual site. And so pattern tap or design problem, and let's see, web design pattern example. See, every time I go and do this, there's like a new website trying to fix the hole that pattern tap left. But anyway, just know that what a design pattern is, and that there are websites and lots of articles about how to kind of approach this and look at the ways that other people have already solved this problem. There's no reason to like bang your head against the wall, right? So, and then speaking of websites compiled by others, this getting inspired, I think, is part of the design process. If you didn't go to design school and learn how to build fonts from the ground up, which none of us have time for, I certainly don't, then you can just go to the web and like folks have already collected beautiful examples of really great design. So this is one of my faves, these up here, SiteInspire. SiteInspire is great. They all kind of have this now, but SiteInspire kind of foregrounded this. And you could go to the website. So here, you know, I'm like, you can just browse and like check out cool design, right? But you could also filter. Like, I'm working on a website for a company. We're doing like journalism kind of, and we are a newspaper, and we usually, well, now we filtered it pretty good, so I think we're there. Or let's go back. Let's start over here, and we are working on let's say I want to do a very minimal website. I want to work for a bar. We're doing a minimal website for a bar. I love this. I love this website that you can just like say, hey, like who did this and who did it really good. Let's go check it out. And there are tons of websites like this. Awards is one of my other favorites. And again, just tons of just gorgeous design. Most of it has way too many bells and whistles these days, because it's just boring sometimes, I think, when you are making websites every day without something fun to challenge yourself with. But so that's part of the design process, and here it is. This is the process that I developed, and this is how I became a designer. Prioritize communications, right? Whatever you do, like, you can have fun with your design, you can go crazy. Sometimes you have full creative control over the stuff you make because people back off, or you're just doing your own project, or for other reasons. But just remember, you always have to communicate. If you're not communicating, then like, people are just gonna like go, okay, and just move on. They're not gonna remember anything you're doing. So my steps are always use the design grid, right? Focus on usable, focus on communication, efficient, and then find inspiration. Go look at those examples, right? So this is the process when you sit down, and you should do it right after I'm done talking here in a second. Get that design grid open, and then go find inspiration. Look at examples, you know, filter it by what you kind of like the idea you have in your head for your usability programming, your designing and coding your usability test. You know, you have an idea of what you want. You have complete creative control. So just go and like try to get inspired, and then create a new variation. Looking at those problems that other people solved already, or the design problems that they solved, or the inspiration you gathered, and make something new, significantly different. Make a completely different version. And then while you're doing it, you know, how did somebody else, you know, create a fat footer or drop downs or whatever it is? And then you got to take a break. That's key. You got to take a break and step back and give yourself some space, because when you're like invested in that creative process, you got blinders on. You can't evaluate it really, because you're so attached to it. you gotta either let somebody else look at it to give you feedback, or take a little bit of a break. You could cook, go running, get outside, just take a couple days, right? And so that's why I say when you're designing for anybody, including me in the class and you, just jump on there, get that first design done, take a break, make a new one, right? Okay? So repeat these steps, and then you'll be a designer. That's how you do it right here. This is the entire class right here, this slide. Yes?
About how much time do you think it should take for us to be doing these projects for this class?
Well, it's a complicated answer because if your creative process is like super fast or super slow, then that's going to change, right? I don't have a set, I mean, we have, what do we have? 3 contact hours for class, and I think I'm supposed to expect that you're going to work 6 hours outside of class. I think that's somebody correct me if I'm wrong. So if you work 6 hours out of class, then you should get up and go do something else, because 6 hours is max.
Is that like about how long you take for like one sitting with your own designs?
Yeah, if I do a design, I won't spend more than 2 hours. After 2 hours, I get up. I get away from the computer, because if I don't find it in 2 hours, then I'm just futzing with it and just like moving things a pixel over, and that's the design is for pre-visualization. The design is not the thing, right? The design is just to understand and have the flexibility to maneuver and change things and test things. The design is just this process, and then you go and code it, and you're going to change stuff when you code it, I promise, right? And you're going to use a framework which is going to make the coding easier, make the translation easier. You're not going to have to go, oh, I realize now my line height was off. It doesn't matter, because Bootstrap did the math for you. Other questions? Yeah, so you could come in, like, you can be that person that says, I can't draw a straight line, and well, great, because Figma will let you draw straight lines very easily. But you got to also be that person and come in here and just, as long as you iterate, as long as you make new versions and just test, just try, then you're gonna design. Okay. Cool. All right. So jump in. Try a wireframe first to just figure out where that stuff goes. And if you've already got that ironed out, then jump into your first design, and I'm going to walk around and see what you're up to.